Hello, Sam here, Really Love Guitars, and cracking straight on with another customer guitar, and this time we have a Tanglewood Les Paul copy, made in the UK apparently. So a sort of gold top, very pretty looking thing, nice chunky body, feels nicely built. It's got some gold strap buttons. The rest is chrome hardware. I've got some Entwistle HV58 pickups installed here, which I've just had a little listen to, and they're working. That's all I can say about them for the time being. This is interesting. This is Ben's guitar, and it's got kind of everything's fairly familiar looking, vintage tuners, nothing out of the ordinary that you'd expect for a guitar like this. Tune-o-matic bridge, stop bar, 2 volumes, 2 tones, 3-way switch. But the first thing that struck me when I plugged this in and felt it is first of all, it's got immensely heavy gauge strings on it. So I measured this G string, and it's 0.025 of an inch, versus if it was a 10 set, it would have been at 0.017. So it's way bigger than the 10. So it's a pretty heavy duty thing, and it certainly feels it. But the first thing I did when I just played it, it sounded awful. Yeah, but sort of buzzing out on certain frets. So there was quite a few things I could notice straight away about this guitar. First one is it has almost no relief in the neck whatsoever, barely none. So, the very first one, it's got a hugely heavy set of strings on it. It's also canted up at the bass strings, so there's a 3mm action down here on the low E, 3mm, followed by 1 down here on the top E, which is not responding to very well. So it's been set kind of in that way. I wouldn't personally set it, but somebody maybe who hits it really hard for rhythm guitar, maybe that's the way they like it, I don't know. But it's it's just a slope going all the way that way. The other thing is, while I was there, I thought I'd just check it for fret level, because there's clearly something going on down here, and before you get very far, it's showing some pretty massively out of kilter frets, and if you can hear that sort of noise, you've definitely got some major problem. So just whizzing along these first few frets, there's some very large rocking noises going on. Some, not so large, but all told, there's definitely some uneven frets going on here. And I can tell that just from the fact that these aren't playing. It's hitting on those frets. So the action's quite low down here. It varies a little bit, but it's around about 0.6. It's higher than I'd like it. It's about 0.6, so that can come down some more. Also, we need to level the frets to get those buzzing out of them. I mean, it's buzzing even with an action that, I guess, on this 3rd fret, this D string is about 2mm, and it's still buzzing. So you have to lift that even higher. Virtually no relief in the neck whatsoever, and also, like I say, we're working on 13s or something like this. It's a very heavy gauge. So I think what I'd like to do, the other thing I noticed, by the way, is tons of absolutely miles of wire wrapped around these posts, which I learned a while back is not going to be very good. This will be releasing stretch for ages, constantly going out of tune, so we'll get rid of that as well. So Ben's asked me to set this action pretty low. He's a rhythm. He says he's a rhythm guitarist. We're sort of verging on lead, a bit of lead. So we want a fairly low action. We don't want it kind of on 1 millimeter or anything silly like that, but we want it to play better than this. The pickups here are a bit on the grubby side, and I don't know whether they'll clean up any, whether that's important or not, but we'll see. Anyway, it shouldn't be a problem. I do think it needs a bit more relief, but I think the first thing I'm going to need to do anything to do anything from this point onwards, I'm going to need to take all these ultra heavy strings off. So, well, God, look at the size of that what do you call it? The slot there, it's just huge. So anyway, I'm going to take these off and I'm going to put some lighter strings back on, and I'm going to try and get some relief into the neck with these lighter strings on. And they may not be even, I don't think I've got a spare set of pens knocking around. I may have an old set, I should say, a sacrificial set, because that would be ideal, but even still we will need to get this thing set up under the sort of tension that we'd have it, because this is, I mean, I don't know how much the truss rod must be working to counteract the pull of this set of strings, but they're enormously heavy gauge, so we'll see. So even if I put 9s on, maybe just have to a little under accommodate, so that the 10s, we can always tweak slightly afterwards on the truss rod if we have to, but I prefer to get it as close to its sort of correct gauge before we do the fret leveling, but not so much that I'm going to waste a whole brand new set of strings on it. To be honest, that would just, ouch, that would just put the price up. So if you haven't seen one of my videos before, I like to take customers' guitars, or sometimes budget-ish guitars like this, which should play better than they do, and give them a fighting chance, give them a good setup. And wow, this is really heavy duty. So yeah, I do it by really following a few fairly straightforward, simple things that I've learned over the last couple of years seem to work really well time and time again. Sorry, this is going to be really boring as I unwind this and try and straighten these out, otherwise I won't get these old strings off or be able to reuse them in any way. A big gauge set like this could be quite useful in cutting slots and things like that. Now there's loads of this is what I hate, I always getting caught up in this jumper. There's loads of extra wire in there, so there's no reason why I shouldn't cut some of this off, and I still have enough to reach the end. So this will probably just help me get these pulled out from here, because otherwise I could be here all day trying to sort out these used strings. Yeah, so what I like to do is I like to take guitars that haven't really been set up very well in the shop or the factory, certainly not the factory and certainly not the shop, most of these, and I like to give them a good setup, and I do it with a series of steps that I've discovered over time seems to produce a really good result time and time again. So it's like a 5-step process really, and I'm at the moment just writing an ebook or finishing an ebook. I've written it and now having it layout looked at, because I'm not such a good layout designer myself, although I can do it a bit. Anyway, so in that ebook I talk about the 5 steps, and they're quite simple, but I guess the way I describe it is most guitars that you buy, the playing action is dictated by the condition of the frets. My God, look at that wire. Yeah, dictated by the condition of the frets. So the guitar will come out of the factory with a fair amount of uneven frets. It's bog standard, and then whoever sets it up, usually the first owner, will lower the action at the bridge as far as they can go before it starts buzzing, and then they have to accept defeat usually, and they back off and leave the action at whatever it has to be set at to avoid the buzzing. And so that tends to be the action of the guitar, and when you buy one from somebody, it tends to be the way you'll buy it from them, set up to the lowest they can get it. Very, very rarely has a guitar, electric guitar, been left without the bridge saddles at least attempted to be lowered, because most people aim for a lower action. I don't know anybody who really likes playing higher, less comfortable action. Anyway, so point to remember is that most electric guitars you'll come across the action is dictated by the frets, and in my setup I decided we'll choose the playing action that we're looking for, and then we'll make the frets fall into line with that, and that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years really. And if you're going to make the frets fall into line with the action that you've chosen, then you're going to need to level them. Pretty much always, just about every guitar I have. There's only been one actually in about 200 guitars. I think one. There's been a couple that you could have got away without leveling, but there's only one that I can remember that really didn't need leveling at all to get the really low action that I was aiming for, and that was an Adrian Smith SDX thing, and that was just, I think, more by chance than anything. So okay, so I'm looking for, what are these actually might, it's probably 9s still. I don't think I've got any 10s as it happens. Maybe I do, let's see. Yeah, actually maybe just, yeah, it might be 10s. Yeah, so it's just very rare to find a guitar. So just about every guitar needs fret leveling if you're going to get a lower action. That's all it comes down to. So so I choose the action I want, and that involves setting 3 points really that I kick off with. And the first one is to get the bridge action the way I want it. So I basically set the action at the last fret, and I tend to go for the same thing every time, and to be honest, I don't have a problem with that unless somebody specifically asks me for something different. I will always sort of go for the standard action that I like to set. So I'll aim for a 1.5 millimeters action at the last fret, and go from there. I'm going to cut this little bit off here because it's really annoying. Then the first step is set that action at the bridge. Now, if you were to play it, any guitar I'm working on normally, and you'd probably see it on this one, is as soon as I set that action, if you try to play the guitar, you'll find, because I've lowered the action at the bridge, you'll find that there'll be buzzing frets all over the place. We'd totally expect that to happen. Is this back to front? Have I got these the right way around? I think I've got these the wrong way around. I'm never any good with these color coded things. I think that one was the B. Yeah. So first thing, set the bridge action where I want the last fret action to be, which is usually 1.5 mils. Then I make sure there's some neck relief, and of course that means with the strings on. And then the next thing I do is come up to the nut and make sure the nut action is the way I want it. And again, if I'm going for 1.5 millimeters at the last fret, then I typically will aim for a first fret action. This is just such a pain working with old strings, I tell you. I'll go for a first fret action of between 0.3 and 0.4. Sometimes it can be as low as 0.2, something like that. And technically, it could be as low as 0.1, because if you think about it, when you put a capo on, that's usually what you're getting. So you've got quite a lot of leeway, but I go for a conservative sort of 0.3, 0.4. Why do I aim to get that low? Because first of all, it makes the guitar easier to play. Secondly, it stops any intonation problems. And I found that above a certain height at the first fret, which is usually about above 0.5 of a millimeter at the first fret, what I find happens is I find that you get intonation issues, which means that because of the height of the first fret, you end up having to, well, the strings are pressed down quite heavily to get them to touch the fret, and that tends to make them go sharp, which causes all kinds of what appears to be tuning problems, but in fact what they are is just intonation problems, which is a tuning problem, but it's not because your tuners aren't working or something like that. So anyway, that's the reason why I like to have a low action at the first fret. So first three steps: bridge action, neck relief, and then first fret action. Once I've got those set, I can guarantee that the guitar won't play, because the underlying frets will now be hitting the strings and making themselves very clearly known, and we expect that to happen, but that's okay, because I'll leave that, because the next stage will be to sort those out, and I'll do that with the strings still on and the action still set the way I wanted it. And I use a tunable fret leveling tool, which is a really nifty little innovation. It's inspired by a tool that you could pay a lot of money for, but it's actually a homemade tool, and it does the job just as well. No matter what the manufacturer of the expensive one says, it actually, this homemade version does really do the job, as you'll see coming up shortly. So I'm just trying to get these old strings on now. The reason I'm putting these old strings on is because I want a set of strings currently. I want a set of strings on here that are the same as the gauge that I'm going to end up with, and that's going to be 10s. And so when I do the fret leveling, I want the neck or the guitar to be under playing conditions. So if it's going to be a 10s set when we finally play it, then I want 10s on there while I'm doing the fret leveling. But to do that, I've got to be a little bit patient and work with these worn out old strings. Let me just make sure I do have these the right way around, otherwise I'm just going to get something to go snap. So this is a fiddly thing, and it does help to have strings. Very often I'll be able to use the strings that the guitar comes with, because if it's somebody's guitar, often it will have the type of strings on that they normally like, and they will just be expecting a change out, or a fresh pair of strings put on in the setup. So I'll use the old strings as the sacrificial strings, if you like, to do the fret leveling. And once we've done the fret leveling, once we've done the action setting and then the fret leveling, then I'll chuck those strings away, because they'll be surplus to requirement. And it doesn't matter that I can put them under stress and they can be bent and crimped, and it doesn't matter because we'll chuck them away. They're just only serving the purpose to load the guitar neck. So I was quite lucky in a way that this is, first of all, a set of spare 10s that I had, and also that they were long enough. There's enough material or enough string here to get them re-strung on this guitar. And then I just need to get them up to a pitch, which I hope it will allow me to do without any snapping. And then we'll make our adjustments. Ow! I hate these stubs of strings, they're deadly. So what I'm going to do while I'm at it, I'm just going to cut these lethal things off, so I don't end up puncturing myself too much while I'm doing this. Ben, I thought I was going to have to delay this for a week or so, but I've got a little bit of time today, so I thought I'd get stuck in and see what we can get done. Right, I haven't got a spare guitar, so I'll use a note from the tuner. Woohoo! Now, since I'm going to tune this, I'm going to straight away, before I even start tuning all the rest, I'm just going to take this do my first part of the action setting here while we're live. I'm going to take this down. See what we've got. Maybe too low now, but we need to come up the other side. Ooh. Oh, that's off the thing, that's why. Okay, I'm just going to put some specs on so I can see the gauge close up. So I just want to get this first part done. There's no point really tuning it all up until I've got the basic action right. So first step of this is get the playing action right. On the last fret I've got about 1.5 there. I've got quite a lot less. That's a bit of a naff thing. So first thing I can tell you, oh lordy, this is crap. Bad, bad, bad. First thing I can tell you, Ben, is the I think the radius of this bridge doesn't match the radius of this fretboard, which is going to cause problems. So if I'm looking for, on this E string I've got 1.5 mils, on the A string I've got 1.25, 1.2, 1. It's struggling. So I don't think they're quite the same radius, that's the first thing. Ooh. Okay, well, let's make sure we get this right to start with. Okay, that's good and low. That's a bit too high. A little bit lower. So this is, if we're feeling adventurous, we can set the action we're after now. There you go. That's the grim truth of mass-produced guitar. It's that comes out of the factory like that. You know, 1.5 millimeters is not excessively low for a Les Paul guitar at all. In fact, it's what you'd hope to get. Unplayable. And if you bought that in the shop and it came at 1.5 millimeters and you couldn't even play it because there was high frets down here, you'd be quite rightly pissed off. Sorry for the bad language. So there's move number one. Let's get the action that we want. To hell with whether it can play or not, because the next stage is let's try and solve some of this problem by putting some relief into the neck, which it hasn't currently got. So we've got the 10s on that we want. I'm going to try and find the right key, and we want a bit more relief. Let's just double check. I haven't got my capo anymore, so I'm going to hold the first and the last fret, and see in the middle there's literally no relief now. Because it's a lighter gauge, there's no space at all. That's one of the reasons why this is playing so badly. So what I want to do is slack off the truss rod to allow the strings to pull. If I can get the right key in there. Got too big a one, I think. think it's too big, yeah. Yeah, so I want to slack the truss rod off. Now, then this is one of those moments that if doing this doesn't give us any tangible alteration, then we're in trouble, because we could be in trouble. So I'm going to go counterclockwise because I want to slack this off as much as possible. I don't like how loose this is. It's not my idea of a nice feeling truss rod adjuster. Turning it, there's quite a bit of turn to go in there, so we may get some response out of it. Okay, we've got a bit of movement there. Before, we didn't even have a note springing up. The fact that we've got some movement there is a plus sign. We've got none along the treble edge, which is kind of worrying. You can also look at it visually and get a bit of an idea. Yeah, it's hardly anything. In fact, the treble side looks convex still. So this could take require a bit of time to settle. I don't really know. I mean, we'll get it slacked off as much as it will go now, and let's see what the strings can do. Whether it's actually I don't know. This might be a double action one, but that would be good if it was. Maybe we got a little. Yeah, we got a little bit of movement out of it. Oh, that's pleasing. I can now see a gap. So let's see. We've got a bit of movement out of it, which is quite good. You might find it's also raised the action as well. Somehow it does that. Let's just go back and double check. Yeah, blimey, that's quite something. Think about it, it's quite logical, I suppose. As you curve the neck, then the nut will come upwards a little bit and the whole overall action will rise up. Now, I'm just checking. That's quite a big gap on this side now. Okay, we'll do a little bit more adjustment. So that's positive news, at least that's actually working. It's pointing out here that the first fret action is really, really high. It's probably close to 1 millimeter. If I had a pick with a given width, I could probably shove it under there. Okay, I'm just going to put this back here and let's just check it again. Okay, so that is a little bit more than I would normally have on that side, and barely anything on this side. So that's a slight difficulty. We've got two different behaviours, not uncommon. Quite flexible, actually. That's the other thing. All right. I'm going to what I'm going to do is let this recover for a little bit and just see when it settles in half an hour or so, because I want to make sure this is in the right sort of position before I start doing anything else to it. So I'm pleased that the truss rod is working. We've got back some relief, and it also means that some of these notes that were completely dead are back, but it doesn't change the fact there's still uneven frets under here, which are pretty significant. So we still got it'll still benefit from a good fret level. So I'm just going to pause for a bit, back in a minute. Okay, not too far later. I'm stopping at 1.5 on the low E side and 1 millimeter on the high side, and then we'll go with whatever we've got at the top here in terms of working on the first fret action. So let's just get onto that. That's the next part of the game. It's starting to feel like a much better guitar already, and once we can get rid of these uneven frets as well, it's going to be a lot better all around. So let's get these things laid out. This is a set designed, or 10 a set of 10s really, these nut files, which is what I'm going to use. So they're going to sit, I'm going to cut the slots a bit deeper into what's already a wide slot, but then I can file this down afterwards anyway. So it'll reduce the kind of extremeness of this wide gap at the top by the time we get there. So I'm going to aim for 0.3, right? And first what I'm going to do in this process is I'm going to drop off the lowest 3, or so the bottom 2 strings, and I'm going to measure under the D string and see what we got, look for the gap. So that's above what I'm aiming for, which is 0.3. So I'm now going to just start cutting a little bit with the correct file. I'm not sure what this material is. It could be tusk for all I know, or it could be plastic. It's not behaving like bone, so I have to be kind of careful with it because it's not a familiar material just right now. So the aim is to just gently take this slot down until it's down to the 0.3 that I'm aiming for, and just you keep checking. There we are, we're at it. So it chokes off when we're just at it. Then I'm going to go for the next one, and again tune this back up. I want to have it at pitch, not because the fact that it's tuned is all that important. It just means it's at the right tension, and it means it's going to sit properly in the slot, so there's no chance of it catching half the way down and giving us a false reading, which could be a pain and costly. So just again check the gap here. Okay, it's quite a bit over 0.3, so just going to get my file and away we go. And I'm just cutting, pointing slightly backwards, so that the string will rise up to the front of the nut from the back. And if it plays cleanly with the feeler gauge underneath it, then it obviously means there's a bit more to go. Okay, it's starting to bite there on that, so I'll stop. And then we come to tune that up. Close enough. And then we replace the E. And measure that one. And again, lift it off, do a little bit of a cut, tilting it backwards slightly. And then after a while, just check it again. Better to do lots of small cuts and arrive there slowly than to cut too far. And if you do cut too far, you've got some options. You can either, or 3 really, you can replace the nut with a new one. Might be an opportunity to upgrade it, or just have a new one altogether. Or you can knock off the nut, put a shim under the whole nut and raise all of the slots up again and cut them all back down until they're the right height, so you buy yourself another go at it. Or you put some bicarbonate of soda or bone dust, whichever you've got, into the slot, drip in some very runny super glue, high viscosity, I never can tell which word it is, anyway, yeah, drip in some runny super glue, and that will make a new cement that you can start cutting again as if it were starting from scratch. So it's a sort of a nice get out of jail free card, I call it. Okay, yeah, we're just starting to bite there, so that's the bottom 3 done. It's that easy. Then I'm going to drop off the top E and the B and go from the G outwards. And again, start by measuring. Now what I know about this is, and you can see logically, there's a couple of things at play. One of them is that there is a bit of gravity at play, okay? So note goes down, No, it goes up. There is a bit of gravity. If I take the grip, well, if I point it the other way, the gravity of this is bowing the neck and changes the pitch. So you just need to know what's going to happen when you stand the guitar up, right? If I know that there is a little bit of gravity pulling this back, it means that the gap here will increase when I stand the guitar up. So if I'm getting 0.3 exactly here, it'll just be a fraction over 0.3 when I get the guitar in playing position, which is great. So 0.3 turns into 0.325, whatever. Equally, it'll also increase slightly by the time I've leveled these frets, because I'm going to take fractions of a millimetre off the metal, which means the gap's going to increase as well. So all I know is that by working with the guitar on its back here, and by the fact that I've yet to do the fret leveling, I can tell you that if I've got 0.3 over the first fret at the moment, it's going to increase slightly when it comes back to the real world. Okay, so it's not a problem. You just need to know what you've got and what you're aiming for, and what the effect gravity is going to have. Okay, so as you can see, the gap's really high. I don't know what this material is. I'd like to say it's tusk, because it has that sort of a bit of that look about it, but I'm not sure. I don't quite know how it's behaving. Loads of room. So you can get this gap really, really small if you want to. It can be as small as 0.1, I found, which is how your capo sometimes makes it. And yet your capo still plays really nicely. So this makes the biggest difference in my experience to the feel of the guitar, and it's the bit that actually, when somebody asks me to set the guitar up, this bit will result in the biggest change of feel overall. You don't feel the level frets, you hear that in terms of improved clean notes and a lower overall action, but the bit that you feel different straight away is this lowered action of first fret, and it suddenly feels like all the effort's gone on playing the guitar. And it can, I'd never underestimate it. I think it can be quite disconcerting if you're not expecting it. It can wonder, where's your guitar gone? It's a very different, very big difference. So be warned. But it's a positive difference in my estimation, so that you get a guitar that's much easier. There you go, we're just choking it there. A guitar that's much easier to play. You can fret chords down here. You don't get intonation problems at this end, which can be substantial. And coupled with a lowered action at this end, because you've got level frets, which you can now play, the whole thing can suddenly just feel like a different guitar. So be prepared for it to feel so different. Sort of black stuff in here. I'd like to think it was graphite, but I'm not sure it is. It feels like something else. Anyway. Just I can see the gap, but I'll test it again just as sort of discipline, really. And I keep going slowly but surely. It's all too easy to sort of think you've got to press really hard, and then suddenly you've gone too far, and that's a bit disappointing. So we're getting there, very nearly there. The tiniest little bit extra now. And I tend to always do the last one with the same as the B. I don't know why. There's something about that last one just being almost too fine. I don't know why. Maybe I'll try it with the correct one, see how it works on this one. Okay, that's pretty much about it. I'm going to stop right there. Alright, let's do it with a real 10, see how it works. keep remembering to tune it back up. Okay, so again, measure it. It's not far off. See the gap. Lift it out gently. Cut away gently. There's a lot of gunge in this slot that's got to come out by the look of it. It's almost like charcoal or something. We're close to being on the mark. Tiny fraction more, and then we'll stop. So, like I said, we're working to 0.3, which is quite conservative, anyway. Okay, stop there. Working to 0.3 at this point in time, we know that when we stand the guitar up, it'll fractionally increase the gap, and we know that when we do fret leveling, it will also increase the gap fractionally. So that's pretty good, right? This is the good bit. Now I have to tell you that this guitar already feels like a completely different instrument. Yeah, absolutely radically different. So now the fun bit is the fret leveling game, and this is where the magic happens. I'm going to get my kit, which is here. Might be time to change the paper on this one. I'm working with 400 grit. I'll keep this one more time. Okay, so fret leveling on a curved neck with the strings on. How do you do it? Well, it's really easy with a bit of practice. So, what do? I'm getting the neck balanced sort of in its neutral position there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the E string. I think I'm running out of pen. It's terrible. I'm running out of pen. Oh my goodness, that's no good. Emergency. Let's do another one down here, surely. Oh, how? Must buy. Oh dear, dear, dear. That's silver, that's no good. Right, I've got a Sharpie and I've got another one in the house. I think I'll chuck this pen away before I try and use it again and fool myself. I'll do it now. Yeah, so before I do this, start this fret leveling, I'm going to just mark the tops of the frets. Now you can, if you can be bothered, you can push the frets away and do all of them. It takes a little while, but I'm just going to do them sort of slice by slice. The slice I'm going to work on at any one time, and it's a bit of a kind of less troublesome way of doing it. So I'm just working on the E slice, if you like, which is all I need to move. Now, what I've got to do is I've got myself a guitar with a curved neck. Okay, and it's got some uneven frets. I've also got myself a fret leveling file that has an adjustable curve that I can bring into it by twisting this truss rod. That's all it is. It's a truss rod with some sandpaper, self-adhesive sandpaper on the bottom. And I can start with it slack, which has a little bit of a curve. But anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these three little feet. So the idea is I've got to map the curve on the neck onto this tool so I can replicate that curve. And the way I do it is I use these little feet. Now what I'm going to just do, if I can show you, is I'm going to just try and judge halfway point on these. So where am I putting this thing? Right, let me just get this right. I'm aiming to position these three little brass feet equidistantly, which is there. So once I've decided that, I mark with a bit of masking tape, because I'm going to keep replacing or putting these feet down as I work my way across the radius of the fretboard. and I'm going to level the guitar, the frets in strips. And having a marker where I'm going to put the little feet back helps just save a little bit of time. Okay, so how do I match the curve on this fret leveling file to the real curve on the neck? So this is where these three little feet come in, and it's very elegant and it's science working for you. So I start with the truss rod slack, so it's as straight as it can be, and it actually isn't perfectly straight, but it's as straight as it can be. And I put the end down on the first foot, and then I drop it onto the other two. If it contacts this end first, it means that this is lower, right? Which means there's more curve in the neck than there is in the truss rod. So what I can do is I can just turn the truss rod and then drop it down again. Now what I can see is it's hitting both of them now, still mostly on the end, but it's hitting both of these, and it's moving the middle one and the end one when I move it side to side. If I want to turn it a little bit more, then I can feel it's now, this is where you have to learn it by experience. I now feel that it's hitting the middle one first, and so I'm slacking off a little bit more because I want to balance it out equally across the two, and that's where I'm happy with it. It's really a bit of experience, and you can't get it until you've done it a few times. So then what I do is I drop the E string off, and I use this string spreading piece of plastic. It could be anything you like. You could even, if you don't have that, you could even drop the string off the saddle, whichever you want to do. Then, knowing that I've got a certain amount of curve in this strip, and I've now mirrored it perfectly on this tool, I now use the weight of gravity on this tool, and I go up and down using gravity on the fretboard. And what I'm going to do is just run it for a few seconds, and then I'm going to stop and see what we've got coming out. And this is where it starts to get really interesting, because the dynamics of this whole thing has changed quite a bit since where we started off. Okay, and I'll just run it for a little bit, and then I'll stop. Now I'm in the E slot at the moment. I'm just working up and down the E slot. I'm not worrying about anything else, and I'm going to stop. Now on this camera, unlike the previous one, we should be in a position to see quite up close, so I can get to about 15 centimeters without going out of focus, which is about here. So my first thing I'm looking out for is it cutting the tops of the frets all the way across, i.e. some at this end, some in the middle, some at the other end? The answer is yes. That means I've got the curve mapped correctly. If it was too straight, if the truss rod was too straight, it wasn't as curved as the neck, it would cut at the ends and not in the middle. If it was truss rod was too curved, it would cut in the middle probably and not the ends. So what it's doing is it's cutting all the way. Not a huge amount in this section here, but there's a bit right on the end, a bit there, none there, some there, quite a bit there, quite a bit there. So it's, what you'll start to see is that it's going to take down the high frets, and it'll tell you which the high frets are by which frets it's taking most off. So I can tell you, you've got on here, there's a group of 3 at the end which are quite high, and it's taking material off those. There's one here that's pretty high, the 13th fret. Sorry, no. 12th, 11th, 10th fret is pretty high, and then you've got one down here which is pretty high. But it's interesting that the when it's strung with 10s and there's a bit of relief in the neck, the uneven frets are not the ones they started out looking like they are. So it's quite deceptive. So having done a bit of leveling, the best way now to test this is to take the string spreader out, drop the string back in, lift it up on its edge, and try out all the notes. Bit of fizzle there. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit more in that E track, but this is what's nice, very nice about doing it this way, is that you decide when you've done enough. You make the decision based on, you stop fret leveling when you have achieved, or when the notes all play cleanly for the action that you've chosen. And that's what's really nice about it. So you don't go any further with the fret leveling than you actually have to. This isn't about creating some abstract notion of perfectly level frets, you know, that you can swear blind are 100% level scientifically. This is about leveling them until all the notes play well for the action that you've dialed onto this thing in the first place. And once you've got that, you stop, because the truth is you don't really care if there's some residual unevenness left behind. If as long as it's underneath the level you've chosen, that's all you really care about, and it allows you to preserve fret metal, really, that you don't have to take off unless you absolutely have to. Now that's still got a little bit of zing in it, because I can see these top frets up here are oh, change the camera angle, you crazy dude. Yeah, there's still a little bit of, there's quite a bit being taken off up there, but I have to say I am pushing it a bit, because I've gone for a millimetre on this high E, so that's a little bit, that's quite a tall order for any guitar. Getting a millimetre playing action at the final fret is pretty good going. So we are talking kind of precision leveling here. So I'm just going to keep going a little bit. All of this is always a judgment call. I can afford to keep going because I know these frets have got a lot of life in them. They're pretty new, and I'm not going to end up in a marginal situation with not enough fret material to play well at the end of it. So I can afford to strike out for these nice clean notes right up here for the action that we're talking about, which is a millimetre at the last fret on the high E. Now, if the situation was a bit more marginal and didn't have enough material, or I was not comfortable about taking any more fret metal off, then I would actually raise the action here a little bit and go for a bit more than a single, 1 millimetre. But I'm pushing it to kind of prove a point, I suppose. We'll go as low as we can, but to really, so you get to see what you have to do. See, we're just about there on those. Now I'm going to stop there, because I know that there's a couple of things mitigating in its favour. One is that we're going to raise the action slightly when we play it in the upright position. We're also going to sand down a little bit more before we finish this whole process, which also then means we're going to take a fraction more. So I'm just at the point where I'm comfortable that it's okay to stop on that track. So that's the E track done. I'm now going to move across to the B track, and to do that I'm just going to go in there and mark the frets. Oh, sorry, camera. Can you see? Yeah, I'm going to mark the frets off in that track. Doesn't matter if I go over the pen I did before, but just as long as the B groove is marked up, that's fine. Okay. So this is a great way of doing fret leveling. And when I started out, for the first, maybe, I don't know, 60 guitars, 70 guitars, maybe more, I used what I call a passive neck method, which is where you hang on, let me just put this, I'm just going to put the string back in, because when I put these feet in the groove, I want to make sure they're all in the same line, which is helpful if the string's in the way as well. Okay, so what I'm doing now, just to recap, is recalibrating, basically. So I've put the feet back in our new strip, which is now we're going to do the B string, but I've put it between the B and the G, and I'm going to just recalibrate. I've used the markers that I put on the side, the paper markers, to see where the brass feet should go, and then I place this down again. Now I don't assume as I come across the radius that it's going to stay the same amount of curvature. It isn't, and I may well find that it changes quite a lot. So I'm never going to take for granted that it's right, and it feels about right. I'll put a tiny bit more on, and it'll tell me pretty quickly if I've got too much on. I can just feel that I have. So just step back a tiny fraction. It's hard to, it can get hard to turn at some point, so if that's the case, then I'll use the Allen key. When you've got too much curve onto it, it makes a sort of double clunk. It touches down at the middle and then the end just fractionally afterwards, but you perceive it as a double clunk, so that's not enough. I've backed off too far. And that's too much, so we're right on the cusp here, and it's quite hard, struggling to get this exactly right. I'll leave the Allen key. I will leave the Allen key in there because I'm going to need to just make tiny adjustments. Actually, that's okay. I'm going to leave it at that. Okay, so yes, for the first 50 or 60 guitars, I think I did with the passive neck method, which is where you flatten the neck and you have the strings off and you just level with a file across a straight set of frets, and it worked very well. You get a much better set of frets than you would have before. So it's a perfectly viable way of doing it, but this is that little bit more precise, and it really does add that level of precision to it. So I'm just, what you kind of would expect to find in this B track is that some of the frets that were appearing to be high before will continue to be, and some of them will ease off and they'll appear not to be high at this point across the neck, and it just means that the high points don't stay the same across the neck. They can change as you move across the radius. You need to make sure when you're doing this that your bends work as well. It can be quite tricky. Sometimes you find that you might get a clean sounding note, but actually when you try to bend the string, it chokes off still, because as you bend, you're coming across to an unleveled part of the neck. Okay, so I'm just going to do a tiny bit more on here, and then we'll move to the next strip. Okay, I can see quite a bit coming off these last two as well, so they're pretty well pretty uneven. So I've done that one, now I'm moving into the next slot or the next strip, and again I'm going to calibrate my file. This is hitting the middle first, just slightly. That's okay. Now, what's interesting is once you get used to this, oops, I've got to mark this off. I haven't got any marker pen. Once you get used to this, you use the first marks you make with your file, you use it as a diagnostic. So you kind of do a bit and you stop, and if the file is not cutting where you expected it to, or it's doing too much at one end or both ends, or too much in the middle, then it's a really good move to stop and recalibrate. And sometimes you'll just catch yourself having made a mistake or not read it correctly the first time round for some reason or other. But you've always got a chance to recalibrate, because it takes so little off at any one point. It's not so voracious that you've got quite a lot of leeway to get it right. Sometimes I just hold the fret and hold the rod there, so it just runs cleanly up and down. doesn't need a lot of pressure. It's again, with instinct, you sort of come to know where you do need a bit of pressure sometimes. When you can tell you've got some high frets, and it just feels like it needs that extra bit of force on it to get it level. But I can see here that we've got quite a flat or quite high frets right at the end. So this should be doing quite nicely. Yeah, taking quite a bit off there. And again, we're just going by what the playing it tells us about how well it is doing. A little bit there. A little bit there. So a bit more to do. So it just tells you what you need to know. It's not quite right, so a bit more. Again, it is this judgment call, so you keep watching it and you think if there comes a point where you're too low, or you're really worried about taking the fret down too far, then that's the point at which you have to decide to hold back, and if necessary then you up the playing action a tiny fraction. It doesn't take much at all to free up something that was buzzing. But the point of this is we're working to the action we want first and foremost, not the action dictated by the frets. So occasionally we have to accept that we can't go as low as we really want. A bit of whizz. A little bit of zizz there. See that? Actually, judging by the slightly flat profile of this bridge, that's pretty low. But hey, a little bit more. Again, if I'm not feeling confident that I'm getting it, I'm going to recalibrate. Right? This last little bit could be, where's it gone? Could be because I'm not calibrated properly. So it's always worth, if you don't feel like you're getting there, go back and recalibrate. In fact, that's got too much bend on it, you see. Right, watch this now. Amazingly, bet you, once I've done this, I run over now with this, it's going to end up with it freeing up that last frets at the end, because I've got the bend just that tiny fraction more correct. What we've got. So it's definitely a matter of experience and instinct or feel. More. See, I've ordered a longer truss rod. I bought. If you're going to do this, you probably will do better with a bass guitar truss rod, bizarrely, because it's overall longer than this one, and it will do it'll cover the neck better than this one. This one I'm just about a fret short really of proper coverage. So I've got that coming in the post, so that'll be probably my fourth ever one. Okay, I'm going to stop there on this one, and if it's not perfect then I will rethink the action. Close. Let's keep going, and I'll come back if I need to do it any differently. So we're now in the A slot. Sorry if this camera shot is boring, but okay, now this one is running what looks like to be clear over the top of the middle one, so I need some more curvature on there. Tiny bit too curved, and that's on. Very, very delicate judgment. Okay, we need to pull the string off the side, use the spreader, and then mark it up with the pen before we start. Once we've leveled the frets, then the next part of the process is to reshape them so that they don't have flat spots on them. Some will, some won't have flat spots, depending on which were high and which were relatively low. Once we get down here, once we get them all done, then I'll go across all of them. Did I just do the D slot? Come on, brain. No, I didn't play. I was playing a G, wasn't I? Come on, get real. Yeah, so we need to level the frets. Sorry, we need to reprofile them to take away the flat spots and make sure they're rounded off again, like proper arch form they should be. So just a quick look at what's happening here. We're getting the middle there, we're getting the far end there, so it's cutting all the way across. We're okay, so let's just keep going. Listen to this. That's playing good. Don't go any further than that. You don't need to. So now we're in the A to E slot, the last one basically, and we'll use this tune or this calibration for this strip and the outside of the E as well. Okay, now that is again just slightly too curved. Just back off. There you go. Okay, let's take this one off. Now I've got filthy hands and my eyes are itching like nobody's business. Push that gap open. Oh, I need some marker pen as well. Damn, I really need to scratch my eyes. But I can't because this stuff will go straight in. Blind me. Okay. Somebody asked me once, Dan in Canada was quite insistent. Hang on, I'm going to have to wash my hands off. Was quite insistent asking me about why didn't I just do my fret leveling with a radius block? After all, wasn't that the most accurate way? And in a certain kind of way, you'd think so. It kind of seems logical that's just to put a radius block over there with some sandpaper on it and just carve away with, let's say on this guitar, a 12-inch radius block surely that would give you a perfectly good fret leveling. And absolutely, there's no doubt about it. You could slack your neck off and use the truss rod to adjust it to it's flat. Once you were sure that it was flat, you could get a radius block for the correct radius, which in this guitar would probably, I think it's 12. And then you could just go away, and that's absolutely fine. It works. The reason I don't do it is, in my experience has shown that it does do the job very well in one sense. It takes a lot of material off very quickly, but it does what I call, it forces its radius onto your frets, whether or not they are actually, let's say, 12-inch radius, because quite often the frets as installed aren't the exact radius that nominally the guitar says that it is. So if these have been installed, I don't know, let's say just slightly under radiused on the wire bending machine, and they're sticking up slightly at the edges. It's quite common, and you can make the guitar play pretty well like that. But if you were to put a radius block on there, the radius block will take your, let's call it 13-inch radius, because all your ends are sitting up a little bit, and it will force them all to be 12-inch simply by taking off all the sticking up material. And that's a bit of a brutal way. A little bit more on there. Yes, quite a brutal way of enforcing a radius in my book. So that's the reason I don't tend to use a radius block and a passively flattened neck for leveling the frets. Sorry. The only time I do use it, and I did it today, would be when I've just put some new frets on, and I just need to do a sort of a basic level to start off with, just to kind of, I suppose it's a broad leveling, you might call it. I'm gonna broadly speaking take off any extremes, and then later on I'll go and do a precision level with the strings on. So it just sort of speeds up that precision level. Well, you know what? Technically we've got one or two. I'm a perfectionist. Let's give it another go. So it's good as the radius block is very good as a sort of broad leveling thing. That's what you need. And the only times I'm comfortable doing that is, as I said, when there's enough fret metal to do it. And that's usually, I can be confident of that when I've myself just fretted the guitar with new wire. And then I know there's enough material to allow me to do that, and not worry too much about the amount of material that's coming off, because I know they're brand new. But I certainly don't want to be using a radius block on an old guitar with marginal amounts of fret wire. And stop there. So I've done a very low action on here. This is 1.5 and 1, and that's, we've leveled the frets to meet that specification, which is quite a challenge, and that's the fun part about this, is, as I said earlier, making the frets comply with what we want from the action, as opposed to the other way around. Okay, so now having done this, I can take this off. I don't need those anymore. The next part of this will be to take these strings off, and while the strings are off, I'm going to give the neck a clean. I'm going to give these pickups, those things, pickups a go. A bit of a clean, see if they shine up a little bit more than they are, and clean up anything else that needs doing. I think everything else seemed to be alright. There was no loose knobs or anything. I can throw these strings away now. They've done their time, they've served their duty twice. I've got everything is the way I want it now. The nice thing is of course, that even though the neck will now slacken off, it will, when I load it again with 10s, it will go back into the same configuration, relative levelness that we just had it in. So that's what we can be sure of. So once I've got the strings off, I'm going to mask off the neck with masking tape, so that we can prepare for the re-profiling the frets, which is to reshape them to get rid of the flat spots. And once we've re-profiled them, then I can polish them out to a playing condition using a few different grades of sandpaper, wet and dry paper. And once we've done that, it'll be ready to restring and then set the intonation and tweak the height of the pickups, which I slacked off a little bit. They were very, very high originally, and I think one of the things about pickups, I'm not an expert in this subject at all, but one of the things I've been told is that if you do have your pickups too high, you do increase the volume or the output of the pickup, but you do at the expense of tone, which, you know, would you rather have a slightly better tone and turn your amp up a bit, or would you rather have more tone, more volume coming off the guitar, and less nuance in the sound? Anyway, so I'm just cleaning the fingerboard, which I haven't had a chance to do yet. Something I always like to do. As it happens, I'm cleaning off the frets. Now there's some, I'm noticing down here, there are still some slight dents down here on the frets. It's a tricky one. If you're leveling frets, sometimes you find that the frets that need leveling are all up here and not down at the end where you've got some grooves from string wear, and you either go in hunting to get rid of those wear grooves, or you take them down a certain amount and then smooth them out with the final polishing, sanding and polishing process. And that's what I'm going to do here, because I don't want to go take the whole set down any lower in pursuit of ironing out those little grooves from playing wear. It's a difficult one. They're not major at all, and they're not going to get in the way of playing. But it's an interesting question about how much do you value the fret life, because of course fret metal equals playing life, really. So the less you've got, the less life the guitar has. Now this the tarnishing on here seems to be pretty permanent, so I'm not really going to do anything. I don't want to put polishing cream on here like Autosol or something like that. I could do it, but it's liable to take the lettering off as well, which is not something I want to do. Okay, next step, I'm just going to take these off and put them off to one side so they don't rattle around. I'm going to reset the action, so it doesn't matter too much if these things move. What I want to do now is take my low tack masking tape and mask off this. What I also wanted to do, let me just do something while I'm here. I also want to just take care of the ends of these frets, because they were a bit sharp. That one is. And what I would like to do with it is just doing this gently by hand. I'm just going to try and take away this little bit of sharpness on the edge here, because it's amazing how much can get in the way of enjoying playing it if there's a little bit of a lip of fret metal. I'm also going to just go back over the edges, the corners of the frets as well with this file. My experience, there's no real way to completely defeat this. It tends to always be a bit of sharpness sticking out somewhere. Not too bad up there, it seemed more down here. One way you can do it is by putting in a bit of lacquer at the end of everything, so you sort of seal the end up. You can hear it grinding on there. It's not ideal, but that's a bit better than it was. What I'm also then going to do is just take off any sticky up bits here like that. can get little burrs sticking up sometimes that can cause all kinds of annoyance. And also then the final thing I'll do is when I come to the sanding part of the process, after I've done the fret reprofiling, then I'll go over these edges and soften them with sandpaper as well. I can see that the little sticky up burrs, it's very difficult because it will spoil the playing experience. Okay, it's better than it was. Alright, so back to where we are. I'm going to cut in a minute because you don't have to watch all of this, it'll bore you. But I'm going to, with my low tack masking tape, I'm going to mask off every single fret. Well, sorry, mask off the fingerboard really. It's the frets. We want frets to stick out. I'm just going to mask it all off and protect the fingerboard from the next stage of the thing, and also it'll cover over the pickups at the other end as well. What I will do is, while I've got this covered, I'm going to just shave this down. This is too deep, it doesn't need to be as big as this whole nut, and I'm going to shave it down with a file, although I'm still not quite sure what the material is, so I'm going to get to see how it behaves when I try and shave it. But there's no reason to have so much material sticking up, not doing anything. The slots are too deep into the material, or deeper than they need to be, I should say. Okay, so I'll cut off and I'll come back when I'm ready to do the next bit, and we'll see you in a minute. Oh, as if by magic, all the hard work's done, and suddenly we're back. I'm back. We're back in the zone of, hey, let's just put some nice strings on and get this done, which is always the nice part. So here we go with our tens, and yeah, all polished up, all sanded, all dremeled. So when I come to do this, one of the things that this guitar had was too much wire coiled around. So I'm going to put this on. The way I do this is I go, pull it all the way through straight, and then I pull back 1 fret's worth, tends to be about right, and then wind it on, make sure the loose string goes under the held string first time round, and then as it comes around the next time, crank up the loose string and make sure that the held string goes under the loose string this time round, and you sort of sandwich the loose string in the middle of the two. And I've not put it on the bridge properly. Okay, and while I'm there, might as well just hook off the end. What I will do is I'm going to put on the truss rod cover. No, I'll leave that off for a minute. I just hoovered up one of the damn screws into the hoover whilst trying to stop something else going into the hoover. So I'm going to have to find a couple more screws to do this. I think ordinary pickguard screws will look better, because at the moment Ben, you had 2 gold ones and 1 chrome one, so I'll just go for 3 chrome ones since there's nothing else gold on this guitar. Okay, so all the way through, pull back 1, wind it on, hold it so it goes over the loose string, comes round, crank the loose string, push the held string, and there we are. Make sure that's on the saddle, which it never is. There we go. So these are going to be a hell of a lot lighter anyway than the previous lot that were on here. It's going to make it easier to play, but more importantly, the adjustment to the nut slots and the playing action and the truss rod as well is going to make all of this easier to play. It'll be very different. I have to say, when I first played it earlier on, I didn't like it, only because of the weird ultra heavy setup and the massively high action. So let's hope this has made it what it should be. So this next bit on the G onwards, we're doing the stringing slightly in reverse, which is a bit fiddly. So through all the way, oops, thank you, through all the way, pull back a fret, hold it with a thumb, crank it this way, keep that thumb holding it down, hope that thing goes underneath. Now it's gone over the top, so just guide it over. It's a bit caggy doing this backwards, and then this time crank the loose one up, put it all under tension, and put this held one under. It's a bit of finger gymnastics that you just have to get used to if you haven't done it before. And then make sure your string goes on the saddle, because it's not much good if it doesn't. And be very careful if the spare string comes round at the same, too close to the playing string, because I've done it in the past where I've cut a good string in half whilst trying to cut off the slack, which is a bit dopey really. Okay, so next part of this process, having set the action, then having made the frets comply with the action that I set, and then after that reprofiling the frets until they're nice and smooth again, and then polishing them out to a nice playing finish. Now we're restringing with as little extra string going around on the tuner post as possible really. You do need enough to hold it there, but you definitely don't want it loads coiled around there, because the next bit we have to do is to, the really critical part of this actually, is to take the slack out of these strings as throughout the whole of the string, right, the whole length of it if possible, and then also out of the stuff that's stored up on the tuner, which you can't really do much about, but we want to get as much of that slack out by force almost as we possibly can. So all the way through, back one, hold it down, wind it on, hang that one over the top already, round again, bend it up, press it down, make it go under. Make sure it's on the bridge, cut the slack. Right, so here we have the guitar, nicely restrung, and we have a completely different, totally different feel from what we had before. So what I'm going to suggest you do at this point, if you're doing this, is grab the loose strings and with your thumbs and forefingers go up and down the string and press out all the slack you can feel in it. There'll be tons of slack in there. So you go all the way up down to there, and that back bit without stressing it over the bridge saddle, and the top bit up here. And then when you've done that, you want to move on to the next string, the A, and just go all the way up doing the same thing, and you will get an enormous amount of slack coming off these strings. If you don't get this slack out now, you'll just be letting it out later when you don't want to, i.e. when you're playing in your band or playing with friends or whatever, and you really don't want to be going out of tune. But this unreleased slack will sit around until it's ready to come out. So it's difficult to get the slack out of the stuff between the nut and the tuner post, but you can try if you get a little bit of bending going on in there. I did once use a plastic device called a string stretcher to try and do string stretching, but I have to say I broke more strings doing that than I've ever broken doing this, although still occasionally you'll break a string stretching the slack out of it. But the plastic string stretcher, although it saves your fingers from pain, I don't really like it, because even though I paid money for it, I don't like it because I don't have the feel don't have that kind of direct feedback about what's happening, which I do with my fingers. So I'd rather hurt my fingers and know what's going on than to use a piece of plastic. Now, having taken the kind of main pile of slack out of here, now I'm going to tune up. First time I'm going to tune up. Before I do, I'm going to put some graphite into the powdered graphite into the slots while the strings are still slack. So I want to just get a bit of graphite into here. It will help lubricate these, and they're plastic. This plastic nut, so I'm not a huge fan of it. Don't worry about the excess, you can blow it away in a moment. I can never get it with this hand, I have to use the other hand. It just makes it a pain in the bum. There you go, that's that, and I'll just tune it up first. Just a quick tune up, blow away the excess stuff, and then back to the stretching, do it again. And this time you'll see how much out of tune it goes on this thing. Now I just want to do a little test while I'm here. This is the last few minutes of this. I'm going to pull out the microphone on this thing.